This is Dr. Lisa Marie Bobby, and you're listening to the Love, Happiness, and Success podcast. Anyone going through a hard breakup or divorce has gone through this horrible purgatory stage of ending a relationship where you're not together, but it is definitely not over emotionally. And this is such a confusing place. You might be questioning yourself. Did you make the right choice? Thinking about maybe getting back together with an ex and trying to figure out if that's possible. Or maybe just trying to figure out if you can be friends with your ex and what that might look like. You know, these boundaries can get very weird, and it's just an incredibly confusing time. And this is often true, anytime a relationship ends. But in my experience, this ambivalence and desire for connection can be more powerful at certain times of year. Like, for example, around the holidays, many people, have memories about their relationship, miss their exes a little more than usual. It can be a triggering time. But I think even just wintertime in general, there's less going on. You're by yourself in your house more. It can really lead you to miss your ex and think about the relationship. And it's really a vulnerable time. You might be idealizing good parts of the relationship and more prone to thinking about trying to reconnect with your ex and whether or not that's a good idea. It can be so hard to figure out what your truth is when you're dealing with these emotions. It can be hard to figure out your truth, that much harder even to figure out your boundaries, right? Can you be friends with your ex? Is reconnecting with your ex possible? If it is that a good idea for you? So many big questions, and it's such a hard space to be in. And I think anybody in this place needs some guidance and support. And so today, that's what we're going to be talking about on our show. And to help you with this, I have asked my colleague Kensington to come on this episode with me and share her advice and perspective with you, because she is a real expert on this subject. Thank you, Kensington, for joining me.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Lisa.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad we're talking about this, and particularly with your expertise. I mean, there are many people on our team, obviously here at Growing Self, who do a lot of coaching with people going through divorce and breakup recovery kinds of work. But you also have a ton of experience. When you were getting your degree in marriage and family therapy at BYU, you ran a group for people kind of working through breakups. Here at Growing Self, you lead our online breakup support group. And so every week you're talking to people just in the trenches of this experience. And I know that you have so much insight to share. You've written blog posts at growingself.com on this topic. And so maybe we can just open this up by, I'd love to hear your thoughts about how, I guess, common it is for people, like particularly in those beginning stages of a breakup, to be grappling with these kinds of feelings and ambivalence about the relationship, even after it's officially over. Do you hear that a lot?
Yeah, that's a great question, Lisa. And I would say almost everyone is grappling with that. I think, after someone who's been such a significant part of your life, is no longer in your life in that same way, it's really normal to go through grief, right? It's normal to miss, that person and that friendship. And so I think it's really natural to be grappling with these kinds of questions.
Yeah. And that I think what's so confusing for people is that those kinds of feelings can come up, that when an attachment bond is ruptured, we have these feelings, we have this grief, we miss people, whether or not it was a good relationship.
Absolutely. And I would say that's one of the things that I've seen my clients find the most confusing is that, they can look back and even if it was, worst case scenario, a really unhealthy, toxic relationship, they'll still find themselves missing that person and, missing all of the good parts, but, also missing just having someone around to share their life with. And so I think, think that can be really confusing to hold both, like, you know what, I know this relationship wasn't right for me, and also I really miss this person, and holding both of those things at the same time.
Yeah. It's like that head versus heart kind of split.
Totally.
Like intellectually, I know that
Yeah.
this person was not good for me. It wasn't going to end well, but I just can't help but myself. I think about them all the time. I miss them. Yeah. Yeah. So, and I think the hard part and the confounding part is that, you know, sometimes relationships do go through ups and downs, and
Sure.
relationships, you know, people take a break and then do actually wind up reconnecting and getting back together again. And I think many times when people are having these feelings of, like, you know, missing someone, they take that as, because I feel this way, I should try to reconnect with my ex.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, I think that there are absolutely situations where, you know, you should think about maybe getting back together and explore that option. But I think that there's other reasons at play aside from just missing your partner, right? And I think, you know, kind of like we said, really, no matter how good or bad the relationship was, you're going to go through that grief process. And so the grief and the missing that person, you know, on its own maybe isn't a good enough reason to get back together with somebody. But, you know, certainly sometimes there are good reasons to explore that possibility.
Well, if you could, let's just start right there. And I mean, now this is a podcast episode, and I know that you spend many, many, many sessions and groups, like, helping people work through these and, like, you know, find their own truth. But I am curious, like, just for the benefit of our listeners, what would, let me ask a better question. Like, what would you advise? What kind of questions would you even ask somebody to sort of help them sort through that and figure out what to listen to? You know, so somebody who, you know, mixed bag of a relationship, but they still really miss this person. How do you help them get that clarity around, are these just like normal feelings of missing somebody that everybody has and you should still keep moving away? Or when is this a sign that you should maybe try to reconnect somehow?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that one of the first, you know, when I'm talking about this with clients, one of the first places where we start is, you know, why did the relationship end? And I think, you know, in that question, you know, sometimes I'll get just kind of the official reason for the breakup from clients, but a lot of the time there's more to the story than just whatever the official reason was that you share with family and friends or that you decided on together. So really going through all of those reasons why the relationship really just wasn't working and wasn't fulfilling, you know, your needs and your partner's needs. I think that that's a really important place to explore, because it can help you figure out, okay, are those things changeable and resolvable? Or if they're not changeable and resolvable, are they things that maybe are okay to accept about the person and about the relationship? Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense. Like, what was the relationship actually like for you? And kind of digging into that a little bit to help people, you know, just experience the reality. Now, but okay, let me ask you this. Because many times when a relationship ends, it's kind of one person that's like, I don't want to do this anymore. And that person has often had the opportunity to work through some things prior to that. Like, they've kind of been disconnecting for a little while, whether or not their partner knew that, which is awful. But have you found it different for partners who were broken up with and maybe even like surprised that the relationship ended? Do they sort of miss the relationship in a different way than people who were the ones who initiated the breakup or divorce? and who also can still
Mm-hmm.
really miss their partner
Sure.
and second guess themselves. How do you experience that differently?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so I think, there are no hard and fast rules, but
Mm.
what I've seen most of the time is that, the partner who maybe initiated the end of the relationship, kind of like you've said, they've had some time to disconnect emotionally, right? And they've had the time to kind of weigh in their mind, okay, what am I going to be giving up? And am I sure I want to do this? And so then the partner who, wasn't their choice for the relationship to end often gets stuck doing that kind of work after the relationship is already over.
Yeah.
So having to go back and, figure out how to disconnect from an attachment that for them is still very real and very much
Mm-hmm.
there.
Oh, it's so hard.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Because then, I think when somebody kind of like works through it and sort of eases themselves out of a relationship emotionally, like before it
Right.
officially ends, even though they can have, some regrets. I want to just honor what a difficult situation that is for people who are going through that just like ruptured attachment and like just the panic. I mean, that like
Yeah.
physiologically based like attachment
Mm-hmm.
withdrawal that goes along with that. And then also having to kind of sort through what the relationship was like for them, because you idealize a relationship when you're in
Absolutely.
that space. Ugh.
Yeah, no, it's so hard. And not to plug the
Mm.
group too much, but I think that's what, is so I've seen be really helpful about the breakup group that I run
What?
is just helping people, connect with others who are going through that attachment withdrawal and that really painful place that sometimes your family or your friends just, they see all the reasons why the relationship wasn't working, but they're not going through that actual attachment withdrawal themselves.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well then, we are not here to make an infomercial for the group for
Sure.
sure, but I am curious, what how do you experience the way that group members respond to each other that is different than what somebody's friends or family might say? Because it's really
Yeah.
easy, like when you're not in that place and you see somebody who's like really suffering with this attachment loss and just the pain of that, but like, your friend can say that he was not nice to you. He
Mm-hmm.
was mean to you. I saw it. He cheated on you, like, like reminding friends of all these things. But the person who's going through it is like, you don't understand.
Right.
Right. So what do you see that's different with the people in the group? Like, do
Mm-hmm.
they also say, no, that he was actually really mean to you? Or are they like, what's the
Yeah, great
difference?
question. So I think, you know, really what feels to me like the biggest difference is just it's empathy, right?
Mm,
Because
hmm.
they're able to still provide that feedback to each other around like, what, these are all the reasons why this relationship wasn't right for you, right? These are all the reasons why it needed to end. But also have that really deep sense of empathy for, all of that is true. And also, this is
Hmm.
really painful and really hard. And you're not crazy or messed up or
Hmm.
broken for being in pain about the
Yeah.
loss of something that maybe ultimately wasn't in your best interest.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I could hear that, like coming from somebody who knows what that pain feels like and is struggling with that
absolutely.
own attachment. Like it lands differently because of that empathy. That's a good point. Okay. Well, such a confusing time, but just to have that message that pain, that longing has oftentimes is not a indicator of
Right.
how healthy or good that relationship was. It means that you're going through that emotional separation thing, which is different. But
Mm-hmm.
now let's talk about the other piece of this, because while somebody is going through that emotional phase of like missing someone,
Mm-hmm.
longing for contact, that's part of it. um Sometimes what I have seen is like people wanting to be friends with their
Sure.
ex, right?
Yeah.
Can sometimes be a manifestation of like wanting to stay connected. It's almost like that bargaining phase,
Right.
like I'm maintaining my connection to this person. And if the person is in like a lot of pain and missing someone, sometimes it can be like, because if we're friends, I might have an opportunity. And if we're hanging
Right.
out, sooner or later, we're going to fall into bed again. So there's like a little bit of a, hidden agenda there. So the question for you is, in your experience, to what degree is that like usually what's happening when somebody wants to be friends with their ex? Or have you also seen someone who is in that space of longing really shift into having an actual legitimate friendship with an ex that's just, maintaining good parts of the attachment, but releasing the attachment to the romantic relationship? Have you seen that work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think, again, like for all of these questions, there's not like a hard and fast, like absolutely yes or absolutely no. But I will say, I think if you're still in that phase where you feel this longing for closeness and attachment to somebody, it's really, really hard to then shift into that friends only mindset. Yeah. And I think, it also kind of depends on what friends means to you, right?
Kensington just made air quotes for those of you who are not watching the video right now. But what friends mean. Yeah.
Because I think that there, obviously there's situations where you're going to still need to be acquaintances or friendly with your ex, right? Co-parenting, right? Or sharing a pet.
Working together.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so I think that it's, when I hear my clients say they want to be friends with their ex, there's lots of questions that come up for me, but one of the first ones is, okay, well, what does friends mean to you? Like what, are you looking for a best friend where it still, feels like the relationship felt just, minus a few things? Or, are we talking more of like being acquaintances, but being like cordial and friendly when you see each other?
Yeah. Well, what I think I'm hearing is that you're spending a lot of time helping people get real clear about what those boundaries are and like a different picture of like a very different kind of relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it's also important for people to, evaluate really like why they want that connection with that person still, right? Does it feel like there's something that person can still, add to your life and you can add to their life in some way that's not going to limit you in terms of, moving on and creating romantic connections with new people?
Good point.
Or, is it really like, if you're really honest with yourself, is it really about, just trying to hold on to that attachment that you're losing in any way that you can, even if it's not in your own best interest?
That's a great point. Is it a way of trying to prevent pain? Is it like methadone, basically, Kensington? Is that what you're
pretty much?
Yeah. Well, okay, a couple other things related to this. One thing that I know both of us have experienced around this is that it can be super hard for somebody who's like really in that pain place and like suffering, when their ex may want to be trying to air quote be friends.
Right.
But sometimes for different reasons. Like in my experience, sometimes a person who has initiated a breakup will feel guilty about that and like, oh, we can be friends. Or, and this is much less charitable, but I think it's also true that the person that initiated the breakup is pretty sure that they don't want to like be in a capital R relationship. Like this is not my person, but it's Saturday and I don't have anything better to do. So do you want to like come over and hang out and like kind of like meeting their own needs through this friendship that the person on the other side who's going through this attachment withdrawal is super vulnerable to. And
Absolutely.
like, it's hard to set boundaries and,
Mm-hmm.
like, can you speak a little bit to that and what you've
Yeah.
seen? Because I think that is just this layer of complexity, like somebody's minding
Mm-hmm.
their own business and then they get that text from their ex around like, what's up? You want to come over? Like that kind of
Yeah.
thing. And
Absolutely. No, that's a great question. And I think that this is something that I see a lot. And this is,
yeah.
it's really hard when someone has decided, you know what, the best thing for me right now is to, not really have connection with this person while I'm healing and, trying to move on. But then the other side is still reaching out to them and trying to maintain that connection. And that's where I think, you got to get really clear about your boundaries and really be comfortable advocating for yourself, right? So in my work with clients going through the end of a relationship, we talk a lot about self-compassion. And one of the pieces of self-compassion is, really learning to advocate for yourself, almost being like your own big brother or big sister or parent, to really have your own back. And I think that this is one of those situations, and it's not easy, and it helps if you can have supportive people to talk through this with, but it's really important to have your own back and and set some of those boundaries. But it is so hard, especially when you're grappling with missing this attachment so much. It's hard to say no to it.
Oh, that's great advice, Kensington, to have your own back, but also do just want to acknowledge how difficult it is to come to that clarity, like for yourself, to say, this is not good for me. And so I need to not do this with you, because that emotional part is like, yes, this is exactly what I want to be doing. That is, and that doesn't happen overnight. That's a journey.
Oh no. Yeah. And I think, with all of these things that we're talking about today, like I never see anyone who, like, we talk about it once and then they do it perfectly from there on out, right?
Good.
Like it's a process and it's a journey. And that's part of why, the self-compassion piece is so important, because it's so crucial to be gentle with yourself as you're trying to navigate setting boundaries and creating new skills and doing what's best for you.
Yeah. Well, and I'm just thinking too that I think people have to like go around that merry-go-round a few times. It's almost like drinking way too much and having a horrible hangover, and then okay, I can't do that anymore. And then you do it again, you're like, yeah, I can't do that anymore. And like you have to sometimes that that old idea that relapse is part of recovery, is just like noticing how you feel after you have contact with this person. And on that note, okay, this is a question that comes up all the time. I'm sure it comes up all the time for you, but that idea around staying connected on social media, because that's a different order of friendship, but can be incredibly difficult and triggering for people. So, and that's sort of a level of friendship in the sense of maintaining a connection. What have you seen as being the impact of that social media connection, or and how do you help people grapple with that, very real aspect of our lives?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, so first of all, yes, I see this all the time. And I think, again, there's no like hard or fast rule about what you have to do. But what I've seen a lot of the time is that social media can almost act like, man, it's like really when you're in recovery from a substance abuse, disorder, right? And every so often you get like sent like a little hit,
the
right?
vodka ad.
Yeah,
Sure.
Absolutely. I mean, it's like it's a similar situation. When you are just scrolling on social media, minding your own business, right? Like trying to have your own back and like do all these great things, and boom, all of a sudden you see this picture of your ex doing something, and it puts you into this headspace that you've been working so hard to get out of. And so I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of my clients will, choose as a way to continue having their own back, to either disconnect on social media from this person, or at the very least maybe mute them, right? So maybe you're not unfollowing each other, but you're not seeing their stuff anymore, or even blocking them, right? And that can sound extreme, but I think that it can be really, really helpful, so that you're not constantly getting these extra triggers.
Yeah. And I think what I'm hearing you say in between the lines, as we're talking about all of this too, it's like that perhaps part of getting that clarity around, that basic question, is it actually healthy for me to try to have a friendship with, like a real friendship with this person? Or is it healthy for me to try to reconnect with this person? I think what I'm hearing you say, it's like you have to lower the static, the noise, like the emotional storm and triggering, in order to kind of connect with your authentic feelings, to think about the relationship in a more, I hate to use this word, but I don't know what other word to use, like a rational sense, it's like, but all the social media stuff and the, like, it contributes to the emotional confusion. Is that
absolutely
what you've seen?
Yeah, I think that there's just anything you can do to minimize the triggers and the bombardment that's going to just like really hurt and kind of, I guess, trigger like this attachment pain over and over again. Anything you can do to limit that is going to help you just feel a little bit more clarity about, okay, how much of this is just me, going through the attachment withdrawal process, and how much of this is, maybe something else that I should explore further.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that piece. So I think we've been talking about how when you're in pain, that is the hope, that is the fantasy, that this is all a terrible mistake. They're going to realize they loved me and everything's going to be different. We're going to get back together. Like that's the fantasy that pain is telling us, right? And that needs to be worked through. Sure. But there are also cases where people work through and really in a healthy, sort of rational way, reconsider their relationship. And there are actually opportunities to try again. Can you talk us through what you've seen that look like when it is actually legitimately healthy and positive for everybody involved? Like, why would a breakup even occur in the first place if that were true?
Great question, Lisa. So I think, one thing that I've seen a lot of the time is that, a breakup will occur when both people are just really not in a place to be their best selves, right? And then after taking some time apart and both, going to therapy or doing, other kinds of personal growth activities, really, become in a better place and more able to step into their best selves and be their best self for a new relationship. And then it can be a great idea to reconsider getting back together with somebody. So that's one situation where I've seen that really work. But I would say, like, the biggest caveat is that, some of this is out of your control.
True.
And you can only control yourself and the personal growth that you do. But ultimately, you deserve to be with a partner who is also working on themselves and who wants to bring their best self to the relationship. And so if you see them, working on themselves, again, whether that's through like self-help stuff, therapy, coaching, whatever it is, right? Those can all be great signs that they are taking personal growth seriously. And it could be a good idea to maybe just reconsider what re-entering the relationship would be like.
Yeah. Well, that sounds like a process in itself. I mean, and I'm sure you've worked with people who are reconsidering. But I mean, even just that
Sure.
word implies like a
Mhm.
lot of thoughtfulness. It's not like you
Absolutely.
go out for drinks and you hook up and now you're back together again. So
Yeah.
not that. It's what does this reconsidering involve from your perspective when people are really being intentional about it?
Yeah. I think it involves obviously like a lot of personal growth on the
Mm-hmm.
side of each person, but, a lot of conversations with each other. So spending time together, kind of testing the waters to see if
Mm-hmm.
things really could be different. Maybe going and talking with a relationship counselor
Yeah.
together,
Mm-hmm.
but really taking it slow. I think is one of the biggest key things here, right? Where
Mm-hmm.
we're not immediately just jumping back into bed together, right?
Yeah.
But really trying to be mindful and intentional about, okay, these are the things that were our issues before. Like, this is what I've tried to do to work on these things. This is what you've tried to do to work on these things. Let's kind of test out some of these dynamics and see where we're at.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm thinking right now of this wonderful article that you wrote for our blog. I think it was Stages of Getting Back Together, I believe was the title. And in it, I think you talked about what I thought was just such a great point, which was, what's going to be different
Yes.
this time around? And like, why would it be different?
Right.
And that can be hard to figure out because I think sometimes people want things to be different in terms of the way they relate or communicate. And they also have intentions that it will be different.
Yes.
But there's almost like what would literally have changed that would make it be different. And so for somebody who's in that space, what would be your recommendations of like, things to look for, like, if say communication was a problem or emotional invalidation or, even trust can be an ongoing problem, right? Like what would be actual signs that something has changed versus somebody telling you that they intend for it to be different?
Yeah.
That's a big question. And I hope that's not too much.
No, it's a great question. Yeah. I mean, I think that this is where, again, if you and this person have had some conversations and talked about, I've changed in these ways, and, this is my plan for how I want to do things differently. This is where like the taking it slow and getting to know each other again process becomes really important. So like if it's emotional invalidation, for example, that was really hard in the relationship, trying to set time on a regular basis to even just talk about your day or talk about, something hard that happened recently and see, right? Like, does this conversation feel different from how it used to feel in the past? I think that those, actually seeing some behavioral changes, and maybe it's not going to be perfect every time, but then, like seeing some of those efforts to make those changes, I think those can be really good signs.
Yeah. Well, this is my own nerdy way of saying it, but you're talking about observational data.
Yes.
Okay, so we have like a pond, it's sort of covered with ice, and I'm going to walk out on this 4 inches with you and see if it holds. And if it does, then we'll go a little bit further. But you're saying that when going slow, it's how does this feel? Is this different? Can I trust that this is going to be the relationship that I want it to be this time? But also I think too, that personal responsibility, like who am I this time around? Yeah. Is that the right way to say it?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that, and it's almost like, getting to know a new person where, if you're entering a new relationship, if you're trying to be intentional about it, you're going to take it slow and, get to know each other and, be looking out for red flags, but also green flags and signs that things are going well. And I think it's the same when considering getting back together with an ex, right? I think, again, since we have a history, it's so tempting to just like jump right back in and pick up where we left off. But if we want to create new patterns, it can really require going slow and being deliberate, trying new patterns, seeing if they work, right? And looking for all of those signs that, like you said, this really would be different this time around.
Yeah, get it. Yeah. Well, and it's just that same idea, that having an attachment bond to somebody is not the same thing as having a healthy relationship to somebody. And that's something that you need to create on a different level. So related to that, and again, this may be too hard of a question because I'm sure it looks different with every client that you've ever had in some ways, but can you identify any sort of patterns or themes, like when you've worked with clients who have done work on themselves, maybe after a separation, and then go back into a previous relationship or even a new relationship for that matter?
Right.
What have you noticed being the most important things for people to be gaining self-awareness around in terms of their own patterns, emotional intelligence, reactivity, ways of relating to other people that you've seen being key to having a different outcome when they go back in again? Because the personal responsibility piece is so important, right? What have you seen?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the big pieces of self-awareness that I've seen be really helpful for people is understanding their attachment style and how that comes out when they relate to other people. And so I think just understanding that and then being cognizant of, okay, what's coming up for me in this interaction with this new person, and how can I respond deliberately instead of just reacting, right? That can be, a great, like really tangible place for people to start.
Well, and just if we could stay there for a minute, just for the benefit of our listeners who may not be really, or maybe have heard the term attachment styles, but don't really know what that means. Would you say a little bit more about what you're talking about there?
Yeah, absolutely. So, attachment theory talks about really like what we need in a relationship in order to feel safe, and how we respond to closeness from other people. And so there's, and I'll let people do some of their own research, but there's a few different main categories of attachment types. There's a secure attachment, which is what we're all working towards. There's an anxious attachment, which means that we tend to, really desire that closeness with others and feel really nervous and be reactive when we feel like we're not getting that from someone else. And a more avoidant attachment style where, kind of that vulnerability or closeness in a relationship feels really scary, and we can react based off of that. And so that's just like a very brief overview, but really I've seen for people to understand, what some of their tendencies are with how they attach in romantic relationships. I've seen that be really transformational in how they, then attach to new partners moving forward.
Definitely. It's to say, okay, I know that I tend to feel really nervous when somebody isn't like calling me every day or texting me at certain times. And then I tend to get angry and lash out, and just like knowing that, okay, this is what I do. And then developing ways of managing those feelings can really change outcomes in a relationship. And so that, to have a different experience, if you're getting back with an ex, that's going to be something important to think about inside of yourself, as well as maybe your exes and whether they've done work on that area. Are there other things or that you've seen being important for people? Or
yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I would say attachment styles is a big one. I think another one that I've seen be really important is this emotional intelligence piece. So
Mm.
being able, one of the really important pieces of a relationship is emotional intimacy and
Yeah.
closeness. And that involves being able to talk about our feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And really, in order to talk about our feelings, we have to know what they are.
Mm.
And so gaining kind of this emotional intelligence piece around, okay, what are the feelings that I'm experiencing on a regular basis? Where do I feel them in my body? How do I experience them? What are their names? Right? That can be really, really important work to then be able to share that with other people, but also create, new patterns around, okay, well, when anger comes up for me, I can know because of X, Y, and Z. And here are some things that I know that I can do to help me with my anger so that I'm expressing it in an appropriate way instead of lashing out against my partner.
Yeah. Okay. So attachment styles,
Mm-hmm.
emotional intelligence work. I mean, that's a lot right there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything else, or are those the biggest ones, would you say?
I think some of the two main ones coming to
Mm-hmm.
mind for me. And I think that you could certainly, spend several months or
Oh,
even
yeah.
years, right? Like working on those in yourself. But
Mm-hmm.
I think that, yeah, for most clients, those are two good places to
Yeah,
start. Yeah.
definitely. Well, and this is so helpful because this is a very like concrete,
Yes.
tangible thing. And I think my takeaway from this is that if you want to get back with an ex,
Mm-hmm.
and if it is going to be a positive and better experience for
Right.
both of you, the work that you're describing
Mm-hmm.
needs to have happened,
Yeah.
or that there is a plan to maybe do some of that together, like through couples counseling.
Mm-hmm.
But unless there's that real reflection on your part
Mm-hmm.
and your partner's part, it's probably not going to feel that different, even if you do get back together again.
Right.
Is that? Uh-huh.
Absolutely. 'Cause I
Yeah.
think that, again, when two people get back together, and I've heard this so
Mm-hmm.
many times,
Yeah.
they have the best of intentions, and there's so many promises made around, we're going to do things differently, and I'm not going to do this anymore. And I think that those promises are wonderful. And, I
Mm-hmm.
believe that for most people, they're coming from a good place and they're
Yeah.
genuine. But if there's not some of that work, both like the insight based work as well as the behavioral change work to support those promises, even the most well intentioned people are going to fall back into old patterns, not
Mm-hmm.
because they want to do that necessarily, but just because patterns are really hard to break out of.
They are. They're comfy. They're
Mm-hmm.
strong. They happen automatically without anybody even noticing. It takes a lot of intention to break out of them. And is that what you think is happening when you see, like, partners breaking up and then getting back together again and then breaking up? Is that what's going on? Is that people like want to be together, but they haven't done the work in these old patterns? Just
Yes. Yeah. Great
Mhm.
question. So I think, yeah, 9 times out of 10, I think that's what's going on. And
Yeah.
again, it's all good intentions and people wanting to do better and be their best selves, but it's it's really hard to do that when there's some underlying things that haven't been addressed, such as
Yeah.
patterns or not knowing your attachment style or
Mhm.
things like that.
Wow. So much good stuff. Kensington, you shared just so much fantastic information with us today.
Oh,
I'm so
thanks,
grateful.
Lisa.
And I'm sure our listeners are too, people who are struggling with just the enormity of all this. Any last words that you might have for them? I know you spend a lot of time with people who are in this emotional place. What do you want them to know?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, just know that you're not going crazy and you're not alone. I think that going through the end of a relationship, it's such an isolating experience.
Yeah.
And especially if the people who we're sharing with, again, as well intentioned as they are, um, just either haven't been there or it's been a really long time since they've been there. There can be some pretty invalidating things that are said. And really, if there's anything that I've seen through my work in this area, it's that, this intense missing of this person, even if you know it wasn't a great relationship and it needed to end, you're really not going crazy. Like, it's normal. It has an explanation. And I know that, so many of your podcasts, Lisa, and in your book, Exaholics, you've talked about the biological component of losing that attachment. And I think that understanding that is really helpful for people. So yeah, just know you're not alone, and all of your feelings have like a very rational explanation.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a nice note to end on, that it's legitimate. It is normal. There's nothing wrong with you.
Absolutely.
And that people do understand. Well, thank you again for sharing your understanding today, Kensington. This was wonderful.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me, Lisa.